All right, good morning through Lograna. Thank you, Lord. Joining me again, Lord. One more round of online lectures. This week is week 6, and we're on topic 4, Somare's influence. And like I said in my response to your Moodle lesson number 4, I said all of us need to go to the Northside Library, the New Guinea collection, and read more about what Somare did during the early years, pre and the independence and post-independence. Yes, it's really important for us to understand more. So we'll continue the discussion with Mr. Ako now. Mr. Ako, welcome once again, and we will now hand over the virtual microphone to you. We'll have Q&A after Mr. Ako's presentation. So once again, our topic for this morning is Somare's influence on PNG's foreign policy and governance in general. Thank you, Mr. Ako. Bye.
Here, Mr. Aguirre. As you can see, I'm in a different location at the moment. I came down to Sydney in Saturday. I had an interview with someone by the name of Tim Shins on Sunday. So I spent about 4 or 5 hours with him talking about the NRA. Anyway, that's another story. I would continue on with the session. I'll share. So, as Mr. Aguirre has mentioned, our conversation for today would be on the Somare influence. And is already, you would already know about what the late Grand Chief Sir Michael War, who he was and what he did for us. This picture shows it's a picture from April 2017. It shows I put it purposely out there because the APEC 2018 copy, CAPI, or the Committee on APEC Policy Issues, invited all APEC senior officers, including the APEC Secretariat and its policy support unit, to the ceremonies of the House to present Papua New Guinea's proposed theme and policy priorities for APEC 2018. So one-day seminar where we trust out the proposed theme and its 4 policy priorities and the economics in their official country positions on the PNG's proposal. Now, between April and November 2017, we convened another 63 bilateral meetings on the margins of the APEC Summit meetings in Vietnam and secured endorsements for the proposed theme and policy priorities. So when APEC convenes, what must be from the 5th to 6th of December 2017 for the informal senior officer meeting, and when I, as the PNG APEC senior officer, presented the theme of harnessing inclusive opportunities, embracing the digital future, and its 3 policy priorities of deepening regional economic integration, improving connectivity, promoting inclusive and sustainable growth, and the 3rd one, strengthening economic structural reform. This was unanimously endorsed. Now, the February 2023 Cabinet Decision number 36/2020 to endorse the PNG foreign policy on APEC and its driver, the roadmap to domesticate the outcomes of the APEC 2018 era conference statement, is the main outcome of our host of APEC in 2018. So the copy between 2015 and 2018 influenced this outcome through seminars, workshops, ensuing cabinet decisions and bilateral engagements in the multilateral arena of APEC at all levels. This would be from working groups, the SOM, senior official meetings, the ministry, and the leaders meeting to come up with this particular game plan, which is now being used as a guide in the domestic and international space. Now, you're probably wondering now, what's this got to do with the Somare influence? Well, it has a lot to do with the Somare influence, see, because all these economies would have studied Papua New Guinea. they would have known how PNG came into being and how the our fathers, including the great Sir Michael, steered this country forward. So they expected nothing less. So we had to do this to gain their trust. Noting very well that APEC is a different APEC is a different process. See, the host prepares the agenda items, and those agenda items must be agreeable. There must be consensus by all the 20 other member economies. It is unlike the MSG, it is unlike the PIF where they have their own secretariats who go about doing those work. In APEC, it's different. It's a hands-on approach, which is the reason why it was a massive massive effort for everyone. So over 140, 147 bilateral meetings between 2015 and 2017 to get endorsement. Because if one, for instance, when we started talking about poverty alleviation, the US said they did not have poverty. So we have to come back and change that. So these policy priorities and the agenda they are all reported back to their respective leaders. The reason why the all 20 leaders, including Vice President Pence, from the groups, came to 2018, is simply because they agreed on the agenda. The agenda is not proper. They wouldn't have come. All of them came because that was the agenda which would promote their own respective economic development aspirations. Okay. So was Somare influential or influential? Now, in his files of 13 July 2019, Mr. Yegiora rightly points to some possible answers to the underlying question by those who have done extensive work and research on this topic. Gedar, 1994, in page 51, while categorizing the period 75 to 81 as phase one of the implementation of this foreign policy, does not really describe Somare's influence on this game. Dr. Mitna, in his 2018 thesis, page 42, while talking about Mauritius' involvement in outlining the principles of the first foreign policy in 1974, does not mention Somare's role in the plan. Brenda's 1970 mentions the domestic power play between radicals and the pragmatic elites, all fighting for their own version of independence. Premdas goes further by adding that Somare articulated this direction during a speech he gave on 16 April 1974 to the Australian Institute of International Affairs, where he pointed out that he didn't want other countries to view PNG's heavy dependence on Australia as neocolonialism. Now, from the speech, Premdas has made the assumption that Somare talked about our impending relations with other countries, which fitted very nicely with the foreign policy of friends to all, enemies to none. Its general objective being to diversify PNG's relations and minimize dependence on Australia. Premdas further states in page 278 that the Ministry of Foreign Relations and Trade would place greater emphasis on trade with China. So this then begs us to ask, were there strategies involved in pursuing this? Did this game plan have the necessary suitably qualified and trained players to advance these objectives? See, we only have to look Papua New Guinea's economic development progress between 75 up to 1980, when another foreign policy was instituted to determine this focus. There were also other influences, like say Albert Marukiki, Professor Wolfers, and former Foreign Secretary William Dean in 2009 mentioned that PNG was unique in comparison to other countries because by 1975 it already had a foreign policy with main elements sketched out by Kiki before Australia transferred foreign relations and defense responsibilities. Somare is not mentioned. There were also others who influenced the process as well. Back in 1962-64, there was a suggestion of the formation of an integrated movement by Albert Marukiki. The idea was for Papuans and New Guineans and Europeans to move closer together, to meet socially, and to know each other better in order to relieve tensions, foster mutual respect and understanding, and counteract violence. This is key in 1968. He didn't get much traction with this, but Nigel Oram's Papua New Guinea Society spun off from this idea, where intellects met once a month to present papers and topics of interest in the territory. Is this why the only reference to international relations in the Constitution is solely centered on Section 117 on treaties? There is a question we have to ask ourselves. People talk about having a homegrown foreign policy or a homegrown constitution, but we also have to ask ourselves: is homegrown a good thing? Griffin in 1974 gives us a good picture of the uniqueness of PNG's foreign policy. Barrett contradicts the work provided by Nitna, Premdas, Wolfers, Dean, and company. In the foreword of the book he edited titled Foreign Policy for an Independent Papua New Guinea, this is from a seminar conducted at the UPMC from 17 to 18 June 1974. It talks about Chief Minister Somare's regret that due to more urgent domestic issues, foreign policy was yet to be given an in-depth presentation, particularly the effects of domestic policy, our people's attitudes and feelings upon the formation of a foreign policy future. This final point is the underlying factor to the topic, the Somare influence, when we bring his own personal experiences into the equation. I mention this because of the following factors. Bringing together under one roof leaders of 1,000 tribes with hundreds of different languages back in the 1970s was no easy feat. So was this where the genesis of friends to all, enemy to none originated from? After all, to do so, one would need a catch cry. So was this it? Was the catch cry friends to all, enemy to none part of the bonding, done by our fathers before they could go over abroad? According to Hank Nelson in his book Papua New Guinea, Black Unity or Black Chaos, 1974, there was already distrust between the Papuan, the New Guinean, the Highland, and the New Guinea Island. For instance, in the House of Assembly, there was already a growing bond between representatives of the Papuan coastal territories, while the Highlanders asserted their numerical strength. In March 1971, during a privately conducted poll, 80% of Papuans didn't want union with New Guinea. Nearly all wanted consultations before any talk of union with New Guinea to get independence could be advanced. The other influences, the Bully Beef Club. You see, all the members of the Bully Beef Club had come face to face with the ugly head of colonials. What was their influence as a group in Papua New Guinea's future international relations undertakings? They all became prominent people as well. Now, trade. See, according to Wikipedia, international trade is the exchange of capital, goods, and services across international borders or territories because there is a need or want of goods and services by either parties. Now, in most countries, such trade represents a significant share of GDP. So while international trade has existed throughout history, for example, the Silk Road, the Scramble for Africa, the Atlantic slave trade, the Salt Trade, its economic, social, and political importance has been on the rise in recent centuries. Carrying out trade at the international level is a complex process when compared to domestic trade. So when trade takes place between two or more states, factors like currency, government policies, economic, judicial system laws, markets influence that idea of trade. There have been recurring suggestions that PNG is basically an agriculture country, and the influence is drawn from the fact that the villager should stay on their land and grow crops. They should become industrious yeomen and the backbone of the country. The emphasis on cash cropping is justified in some cases because of extensive areas. It is the only possible industry, but it must be accepted that to make a man a producer of rubber or copra on a small scale is also giving him very little. As as other underdeveloped countries have found, the rest of the world is not eager to obtain the fruits of the land, and many people are not content to pay in the village to dig, plant, and pick. To develop the land can be an alluring slogan, but it does not lead to membership of the Advanced League of Countries. Hank Nelson says this in his 1974 book, which has a hint of truth also. Now, the need for economic development. Papua New Guineans wanted economic development with a different aspiration. For instance, in the Western District of Papua, over 70% of the workforce described as wholly subsistence. In the Chibo district, only 7% relied wholly on their food products for their livelihood. Nelson keeps on talking about that. And so the question now is, did our fathers realize that international trade was crucial in attaining economic development? But that because we didn't have the necessary qualified firepower back then to take this ideal out, they made sure that it was listed under Section 117 of the Constitution to be pursued by their sons and their sons in their coming generations. The political consequences of this uneven economic development were great and potentially disastrous. There were now two contradictory arguments from the population: the cry of being neglected, while the prosperous claimed that they were being forced to support the rest of the this is the second claim has a ring on our current situation at the moment, when only 85%, when only 15% of the workforce is paying tax, and so there's this cry by mostly the middle class who make up the bulk of the 50% that they are supporting the rest of the non-paying population of the country. So that's a reason why their taxes should be decreased. Okay, so going back to our conversation, so based on this led to strong resentment against both the government and those areas where investment in economic development and social services were relatively high. What mostly became an obvious target of hostility. It was said that $130 million provided from Canberra was dissipated in many non-productive ways, in Port Moresby, such as providing more bureaucrats, more office blocks, etc. Sentiments of secession fed this sense of neglection. Does this ring a bell today? Now, amidst foreign domination, the most cash crops were produced by foreign-owned plantations. Copra, cocoa, and rubber were largely plantation crops. 70% of the coffee produced was an exception. So by the mid-1970s, more copra, rubber, tea, and cocoa coming to the plantations were from foreign-owned plantations, and not from the smallholders. So the aspiration of Papua New Guineans to enter the cash economy linked with a growing sense of nationalism, which came into direct contact with the foreign domination of the economy. The Australian administration had demonstrated its belief that foreign-owned plantations would not be a political liability. Its policy was derived from an ideological commitment for free enterprise, meaning white free enterprise, a lack of confidence in Papua New Guineans, and a belief that all should share in economic development. This unfair distribution of wealth acted as a stepping stone for the fathers who took it upon themselves to lead. It would seem that Papua New Guineans were providing the land and the labor, while the skills and the capital provided by the foreigners was not as evident as their profits and affluent way of life. So under these circumstances, how did the fathers view their vision of international trade, or more or less undertook to undertake a new country's foreign affairs? And how did Somalia influence this drive in this direction? We continued with the influences, one of them was the Constitutional Planning Committee and its 1974 report. The advent of the homegrown constitution, was this a good thing? You see, basing this new country's laws, regulations, and rights to ward off the negativities of the past, or was it future looking also? The House of Assembly was another influencer. Unfortunately, it had no control over international relations. And we can now feel the tensions of how much our fathers wanted to do in terms of international relations. But to no avail. The Australian administration choked all these attempts. Which brings me to the point. So was our first foreign policy an attempt to seek a level playing field in the international arena to enable our infant foreign service the foothold it required in the process in order to map out our advances in the world of diplomacy and international trade? Why was this happening? Was this why PNG's first foreign minister, Sir Albert Mayukik, made extensive tours to the capital cities of numerous countries, and the headquarters of international organizations, accompanied by the first foreign secretary, Sir Anton Siago, who formalized relations with a record 60 countries and organizations? What the fathers were expounding throughout the world then was in actual fact open regionalism in the sense of the universalism mantra. It was as if they were plotting and setting the scene and preparing the foundations before PNG could venture into the maze of international. The national constitution. You see, the goals and principles of the constitution promote integral human development, equality and participation, national sovereignty and self-reliance, all fundamental to traditional Punjabi societies. This is according to Chalmers and Paliwala, 1984. PNG is committed to development according to its constitution, national goals and directive principles. Page 2 of the constitution. There is no mention of international relations, no foreign policy in our national constitution. So, does Section 117 on treaties suffice to plot a pathway in this direction? If so, how? The lawyers will explain that better. Again, if so, a lot of questions have been raised on this very notion by experts in the field. Questions such as, does PNG really need an overarching foreign policy to be listed down in the national constitution to guide our engagement abroad? If so, why? Or should we leave it to the government of the day to determine how the country should conduct international affairs based on the constitution's national goals and heritage principles? We must also note that the prejudice of the ministers for foreign affairs on the international relations outlook must not be underplayed as well when assessing this question. You know, in between 1982 and 2025, like I mentioned earlier on, we had an overarching foreign policy of active and selective engagement. So everything depended on how the Minister for Foreign Affairs interpreted it. That's the basis of this final last sentence. Regional political underplays. Jeffrey Lack as an LUCK in the Australian. You'll have to see Keith Jackson's the links on the screen there. Mentioned that Gough Whitlam used PNG as a lever to advance his ambitions in the Labour Party. His regular visits to PNG culminated in his 1970 tours of the territory, inciting radicalism and disparaging the efforts of government, business, and settlers in his crusade against what he termed Australian colonialism. Australia ensured a House of Assembly of 100 members was elected from a common rule in 1964, but the Trusteeship Council and the UN Special Committee on Decolonization ultimately demand independence for all colonies. Whitlam supported this, oblivious to the realities of PNG or the wishes of the majority of the people. So did Gough Whitlam's ambitions for the ALP leadership and ensuring national elections in 1972 paved the way for Papua New Guinea's independence in 1975? If so, how much of this intention had to do with the framing of our first foreign policy? In 1965, during a visit to PNG, he warned that as soon as Labour came to power, it would announce full self-government of PNG and immediately set the constitutional bills in motion to grant independence. By 1967, he had become the LP leader, and although he narrowly lost the 1969 elections, he continued to tour PNG, quoting radical elements such as the Pangu Party, while ignoring government officials. So did Somare have influence on his foreign policy? In the lead up and during the 1968 House of Assembly elections, Pangu was a domineering party, with its membership made up mostly of those who had gone to the admin college. But there were also other parties in the equation, such as the United Christian Democratic Party, the All People's Party, the New Guinea Agriculture Reform Party, the Territory Country Party, and the National Progress Party. So there was no shortage of political aspirations. By the 1972 House of Assembly elections, these parties would evolve into a more popular ones we all know today. So again, where did this best policy actually come from? If it's not in the Constitution, what role in fact is Somare and others within play in influencing this outcome? I'll stop there with that question, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Ako, for adding another dimension to our discussion on Sir Michael Somare, the late Sir Michael Thomas Somare's influence on our foreign policy and his involvement in government pre and post independence. We now open the floor for questions, comments. We'll start off with our first person, Jerome. The floor is open for the question and comment. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Ko, and good morning, everyone. I have 3 questions and a comment. So let me begin with my comment. Last lecture we discussed something a topic on foreign policy on independence, and we have discussed and said that friends to all and enemies to none is we said that it's kind of not good, and we have discussed that we will do away with it because our country is in a position to demand them to kind of we are suppressing ourselves. So that's what we have discussed, and I understand that point and I agree, but the policy was very crucial at independence because it maintained good relations with other countries, and it was a pragmatic approach that allowed PNG to navigate complex international relations with other countries during that time. So at independence, that policy was crucial. So that's my comment regarding last lectures. So moving on to my question. My first question is, I will read all my 3 questions, so Mr. Go can take note of it and answer once. So my first question is regarding the last topic. How did the PNG geographical location influence its foreign policy approach at independence? particularly in relation to regional relationships? That's my first question. And my second question is, what were some of the key challenges PNG faced in implementing the friends to all and enemies to none policy at independence? That's my question, second question. And my third question is, how did how did the friends to all, enemies to none approach shaped PNG's relationship with major powers such as Australia during the early years of independence? So that's my three questions. Thank you.
Those are very good questions, Jerome. So PNG's geographical location definitely influenced the French to all 1975 foreign policy of French to all and enemies to none. From last week's lecture, I mentioned about the regional economic, the economy of the region during the time, straight after the war coming up and coming up to the 1960s, where most of the Asian countries were becoming independent. And by the late 1960s and 70s, they were already trading. So everyone, when you look at the map, everyone around PNG to the west, we're already trading. And trading, as in trading, would mean that working on the economic prosperity of the young people, while we were still working towards becoming independent. So that geographical location influenced the foreign policy French to all, because then the moment kind of you mean late bus degree. So once you make him go ahead, we immediately went out. We immediately went out under that French to all. You're talking about man that you know, no good line. We play good line. We want to be French anymore. We don't have any enemies. Please come into our country. We open for business. Okay. So that leads on to the key challenges. So the major key challenges now, and you may answer in the first one, because you may late bus, our expertise levels were unbalanced. See, most of the Asians had trade experts already. They were working towards, they had tied down, were working towards tying down trade agreements with other countries among themselves, or with the other bigger countries. While they were tying those down, we had visits by our leaders saying that, listen, you are organizing trade arrangements, we want to modern, but our country is also open. Come and let's talk about trade. We will continue to be late bus in a lot of things, and most of that coming from behind. Coming from behind has plagued us right up to this very day, simply because of the incapacity of our own systems. So going on to the third one, so how did the 1975 foreign policy serve PNG's interest in the early years? We just answered them with answering the two questions, I think. We're a new kid on the block, late, but better late than never, and we want a piece of the pie. Unfortunately, we didn't have the capable manpower team members to go ahead and grab a large portion of the pie. And this is something which we could have rectified when the new foreign policy in 1982 came on board, but we didn't. So even right up to now, we are still working on negotiating free trade agreements. 50 years later, we are still being laid past by ourselves. Now, this is self-inflicted. And I say that because when PNG joined APEC in 1993, APEC had instituted the BOGO goals of open trade and free trade and investment facilitation. In 1993, yes, we were a bit late, but it was 1993 when all those APEC member economies who were members then, the Indonesians, the Philippines, the Malaysians, the Thai, they already had a certain level of economic development. We had that opportunity to work in that APEC membership to secure trade arrangements. So we missed it. You see, the BOGO goals was an undertaking for all the members who come. There were 17 chapters, what they call IAPs, individual action plans. And those action plans, when you go and Google the 17 chapters of the APEC BOGO, they talk about rules of origin. They talk about non-trade measures. They talk about customs. They talk about quarantine. They talk about 17 important factors that can improve economic development. And our attempts at fulfilling the requirements of those 17 were slow, simply because we didn't have the capacity to do it. But then, going back to the force multiplier I was talking about, we were part of a team now, see. So the onus was on our systems to send people out to go to Indonesia, wherever, within the APEC process, local simsabi and conduct and build them up. So that was the challenges we had, and it's the PNG's interest itself in the main in the early days was simple, was getting to know the players and joining the club, which I personally think we were very late in doing so. I hope that has answered all your three questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ako.
Okay, thank you, Jerome. Thank you, Mr. Ako. Now we Arim, all questions, the comments to Modi. Modi, please. The virtual microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ako, Mr. Ako and Mr. Nigira. Can you guys hear me? All right, so I have one comment and two questions. My comment is in line with the presentation as well as our lesson number 4, which was last week in week 5, to do with early independence and the foreign policy and Somare's influence on that. So, and also, like the presentation today said, it was all the leaders at that time during independence. And I picked up that one of the important components of going forward with a foreign policy or any foreign relations was patriotism. Something that our forefathers and all the leaders in the past, especially during independence, before independence, they were very patriotic about the country and where we come from and how we are represented overseas or in any international meeting or arena, which I feel that nowadays our leaders sometimes they go, and when they're in an international arena, we usually think about what we can leverage, what resources we can gather, but we forget that patriotism and the love for the country, our country, Papua New Guinea, is an important component when we're talking about foreign relations or adapting a foreign policy, because then it comes in line as well with with our national interests as well. So that's just my comment on last week's lesson as well as today's presentation. That's something that I feel that my peers and I should think about as well when we become leaders in the future. Loving our country and doing things for its sake in order to progress well. To my question, my first question is, to Mr. Ako, how did late Grand Chief Sir Michael Somare how was he able to balance PNG's historical ties with Australia while also pursuing strategic autonomy, especially in foreign relations, to do with diversification of resources and all that, and trade partnerships and foreign relations? So that's my first question. I'll just repeat it. How was late Grand Chief able to balance PNG's historical ties with Australia while pursuing strategic autonomy in foreign relations?
I'll answer. You have a couple, so I'll answer this one, and you can come the others.
Yes, I have only two questions. You'll answer this one, and I'll ask my second question.
Okay. Okay. We must note that remember the fact that generation of leaders were born during the Australian colonial era. Time was big plan, and when they went to school, they were always the presence of Australians were there. Okay, and now when you look at that together with the influence of the missionaries in the education system of our country right up to now, that one of the advantages which that gave us was it instilled in the smarter ones an idea of how to maneuver among these variables. Okay? So in the presentation, you would look and in the presentation we talked about Gulf Woodland. So it was about personalities now. The late virtue and booming Bogota line, it was a very impossible. I call it impossible because the Highlander and the CP and the Polai and the Papuans, they were all leaders in their own right. They went through initiation processes. And when you go to, none of us have gone through initiation processes. I mean, I for one, have never gone through an initiation process. But for those who we know, our grandfathers, and from the stories our fathers told us how they went through the initiation process. And when they came out on the other end, they cared no one. All money. And then suppose you do not have, they all caring. So then you look at the aura and the pool which says Great Chief Sir Michael had to bring everybody under the same roof. Of course, there were other variables. You had the blueprints also, you had the bully beef club. And there was providence, or people might say luck. But on the other side of the Coral Sea, you got not to stop name to and empower them stuff. So he was deputy leader of the ALP, and he made trips to, he understood the situation. He was an important plan to trip from the late 1960s all the way up to 1972. And he still came up to Mosby, kept on talking with Sir Michael, and by the time Sir Michael and the Bully Beef Club and all the others were imagined as that people to talk to. So when you go back to the slides, you will realize that Mr. Whitlam wanted to become PM, but then been deputy. So he worked within a system for overcoming party leadership and winning, and then going inside the election. In the meantime, I promised him online law, the territory, the colony, you program must, the top budget. You program must vote me because me come a PM. Me bagi independence laws, lahat people stop them, business people, boom. That's the pigeon version of it. So I'm talking about one scheme blame me. And then go back and talking about leaders blame me. Now me come up PM, by maximum independence, something you fight, old man talk, wait 10 years, so me come up PM, by maximum. So you look at the power place in world and the interest in world, which all the interests were going towards the same outcome. For leaders women like you become a independent. So you know, sometimes I wish that we were there watching them, watching their private talks and listening to their private talk. We would have known a lot about all these things. So that's how Sam Michael balanced it. And talk a smart man when he realized that the politics of the situation was like that, and the number of players he had to pull in to balance it. That's how he went. In one of the coming lectures, we will talk about St. Julius. He also was equally smart. All of them are all smart people. And they had to balance their own kind, and they had to balance all the others. I mean, you look at our current national elections, or recently concluded motokoitable elections for the assembly. That breaks down the whole traditional family culture. It breaks down the whole traditional family system. I mean it in a good way. It breaks them up, and then after the end of the election, everybody comes together again with a new leadership. Okay, so that's how St. Michael would have balanced internationally and domestically. I'll answer it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Ako, for your explanation. It's very insightful. So to my second question, how did Somare's approach to foreign policy, like you've explained already, compare with that of the other leaders in the Pacific region?
Your question, if I heard it correctly, is how did Somare's approach to foreign policy compared with other leaders in the Pacific?
Yes, that's my question.
Yeah. There wasn't much to compare because by then only Fiji had become independent. I think Fiji became independent in 1970. So all the independence passed. You had Samoa, which had never been colonized, although across the ocean to the of them was the American Samoa. So he didn't have much to talk with them. There was less interaction with the other members of the Pacific, apart from the organization towards the first South Pacific Games, which all the leaders met to organize that. So it also much, we realized from St. Julius's foreign policy intent that after Pius Winty came up, former Prime Minister Pius came up with the Look North policy, and when St. Julius came on board later, he added the word the Pacific. So everybody look north and swim the Pacific well. How well you swim was another thing.
Thank you, Mr. Ako, for your answers.
All right, thank you, Mori. We move on to our next person on the list, Marcus.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Yeager and Mr. Akum. You can hear me? Okay. A comment regarding today's presentation. Did Somare had influence in our foreign policy? In my view, I think it does have at the time because we were getting getting independence. So plus he also was the first minister to go to the official parliament because that's the only minister who represented the Southern state here. The year presented office. It has like he have like views on PNG at the same time, like he was traveling, and like he had views on policy making. So when independence happened, and he did all policies, like it basically look in the interest of Papua New Guinea and also foreign interest. So in the creation of this friends to all, and then that friends to all and enemy to none policy. At that time, like Papua New Guinea has followed like a foreign policy principle since like the independence, which it focused on openness and neutrality in our relation to like global communities in kind of areas such as like economic, politics, technology, and like security. So, however, with the current politics and technology and security between like major powers like and all that happening between the United States and global conflicts, do you think, Mr. Akko, do you think this policy like friends to all, enemy to none should be changed, or should PNG continue to remain neutral, or is it inevitable that we have to take sides sooner or later? That's my first two questions to you. In regarding friends to all and enemy to none policy.
If it, I'll answer it this way. If the current mantra remains, then we will have to interpret it by determining the degree of friends we have. We don't need to be enemy to anyone. But you may one sabe de todo money, me no like him, and we don't talk about him. Stablo mind us all the stuff. And it will come to the stage where when you join the workforce, be it in the private or the public sector, you will come to differentiate between your friends and people you don't like. Some people you won't like, but you will work in the same office. So the onus is on you now to be professional about the job on hand. I mean, not online we're here. And Mr. Yura talk to Mr. Towe, but also all population you never talk English. But online we're here. That's all sabe to lose that technique. All not like it, but because we work on the same company, same office, but professional on the post in the morning and then walk past. So that's one of the ways we can approach this French story tonight currently being used again. Like I said last week on Friday, there's a call from the security community saying that such a continuation of such a mantra, it borders on, it shows the world our weakness or our indecisiveness. And then I was with funny. I was on the same pen with as departmental head, as secretary. And when we started talking about that, and he also has his views of the current the new draft which I'm looking, to looking and toss a man. A new draft there. And walking maybe look at him yo. And when he said it, me, I looked at him again to explain. And because I mean, you like balancing, and we know some weight low, the weight low bilateral goal set by you goal set. And then not the weight go ahead again by you goal set. So I'm also on him now. So that's from a departmental head who's also read the draft. So you will have your comments, and I will have mine, but the onus is on your generation. And people who are coming later, you will be the ones implementing this policy for the next 10 years or how long one of you will become smarter, become a departmental head and say, hold on, the last foreign policy review was in 2025. And now in 2050, we need I hope it doesn't go that way, that we do a review in 5 years' time. Yeah, so I'll answer it that way. So.
Okay, I have three additional questions in relate to the friends to and enemy to non policy. So, what are the strength? First question: what are the strengths and weaknesses of the friends to all and enemy to non policy in today's geopolitical climate? Second question: in an era of increasing global tension, how can Papua New Guinea maintain its neutrality without promising national security or development? And third question: do you think aligning with a major power such as United States, China, Australia will bring more benefit than staying neutral? Why or why not?
Those are very interesting questions. First one, the stretch of the Prince to enemy to none. The strength is that we become part of a well globalized community. But know very well that if you put yourself in the shoes of a big economy and you view the small economy saying he or she is friends to an enemy to none, it's not okay. Or bring it down to a village level. Bring it down to a village level and want a family. Your family has about 15 children. You have 15 siblings. And the other family and two as well. That's why most of the time, time was around also those monos are hitting on manual proman it's because of their numbers. Are we not looking at the same thing? Isn't that our is the same? That's the way we are moving. That because we are small now, we don't want to be classified as enemy of one of those big boys which we are having coffee with. We are saying that there's a strength and we will remain like this and move forward. Okay. Or you did mention about being neutral, but in being neutral also mean that it affects your relationship with others. Okay, being neutral. What happens if you are in a big multilateral conference and people who have invested heavily in your country are pushing for an agenda and you want to remain neutral? Even the union, even though from meetings with me to you have to lobby namin kasen sister bulo to kay lo book the tomorrow ya tayo nila bugin money you promise to cause and bring me one within 500 kg. Ang Korea talk 1,000 book the Thomas. And then the meeting arrives and then the online talk meet like we want a man call lo 1,000. And you already go ahead lobby for 500, so you carrying 500,000 goes at time to put in money. How do you wait? Because you talk to 500 or you talk to 200 because the capability they were put in. While all the others went with the uncle because of foreign uncle, because uncle, big uncle, and then big brother, papa or mama. So those are the variables or the configurations we should bring into the international relations and view the club. So now you with your 200K, you now know who your friends are. You've been like neutral, you lobby one time on. It's like a twin brother and sister, you young brain, big baby, or all Bachelor, go on time. So the next time now, when they call for a family meeting, will you support them? Or you become son at the guide, Nino Kelo, one mama put in 200 kina blow me uncle, so bye, migo, bigasang walk. That's what people normally do in families. Because you have lost that trust of others. So being neutral is also not a good thing always. Now the third question was I can't remember, you mentioned about aligning with the
Major power. Yeah. Do you think aligning with major power such as like US, China, yeah, will bring benefits than staying neutral?
Okay.
Why or why not? If
That's a very good question, and that's a good example to it. When you look at Papua New Guinea's hosting of APEC in 2018, that's a very good scenario which I can answer this question. Noting that in 2018, the US and China were in a trade deal. Now, all current trade will come up almost below November 2018. So all come. And they were influencing. So paragraph 9, 16, and 17, the APEC leaders declaration, all using the trade war, not like putting recommendation, but to them agree. Not like putting recommendation, but to them agree. So we were host. You couldn't align with anyone. Of course, President Xi, he arrived here 2 weeks earlier, or 7 days earlier. While Ombudsman by USA, they came in a couple of days before the leader started. So we put our bilateral interests aside. You says, Chair, you have to be neutral. Out of the 20 online nuclear chair meeting, you must neutral. So what they did, I was Prime Minister Honor's runner. So I ran between all the economists between 9 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. for APEC House, trying to convince them to agree on paragraph 9, 16, and 17. The interesting part of it all was the other 18 economists were now going back to their bilateral relationship, one time US or China. It was a really interesting time to be here. Because time you go approaching of the economy, and but support seriously. But the government will worry upcoming free trade agreement negotiation on the China next month. So we plan look fast. Okay, so they became neutral, and I became pissed off. How you come neutral then? Looking so being neutral is not good. This is bad. So, and if you read the book by Pelukim, so this particular country, I'm talk neutral, and I'm go support not the way. Time them lo host next year, me back in Lole. When they said that, because when they hosted, they never hosted the leadership. Widespread strike come up with no. So Nipla go to Singapore, and when they wanted to have a leader statement, I said no, it will never happen. So I held out between 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. to Singapore. It never happened. Last year, Nipla hosted more than leaders. And yet you guys signed the trade war that was happening. And we never considered our declaration. People downgrade him to a statement. And now, you're not a host. How am I supposed to go back to Prime Minister Mark and tell him that Nipa signed a statement? Last time. So that's being neutral. That's the hard facts of being neutral in such a situation. While they were doing what, answering your question, they were aligning with their national interest at stake. They knew that they had to sign that FTA one time China because of the benefiting country law, which we would have done the same way. Because regardless of it's a multilateral situation or bilateral situation, the underlying factor of the deal is that the national interest comes in. And they would have had foreign policy white papers to NATO. That's why when they looked at it, and when they look into those paragraph 9, 16, and 17, those were WTO statements. If we had taken them out, we would have still had a declaration. But the mere fact that those texts were in the declaration, the economists could use it as a declaration, as a bargaining chip. Lord, you rouse it. So when I suggested that to PM and the PM to go talking about, so when I went to tell him, so we're going to take this 3 paragraphs out so that the declaration can be sent. No, lose some stuff. Stay in the time rouse it. We have the advantage, they'll be quickly decided this, but there's nothing to bargain for, nothing to negotiate, or nothing to be sucking about. So situations like that happen. So aligning can be good. Aligning can be bad also for the third party. In a multilateral situation, you need to consider it very carefully. Just like what happened to us in 2018. Economies were aligning according to their bilateral relations with those two countries. Economies. And at the end of the day, the US pulled back. The US were looking forward now. Now, 7 years later, you can see how we are moving. And those resulted from the US saying, okay, we will agree to what China is saying. We'll pull back. So the US pulled back. So, like now, okay, Muslim, so we started interpreting how the situation was in the coming years. Then you can see where the alignments are moving because of the goodwill of 2018. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Ako. Just a comment regarding this policy. In my view, personal view, I really don't like this policy because it makes Papua New Guinea weak, being neutral. Also, like we are vulnerable to Western influence due to this policy, where like other countries such as China, Australia, they can easily influence PNG when it comes to its policy making. Also, like I think in this policy, friends to an enemy to none, it will cause internal like policy confusion. Like for it, meaning that when we try to please everyone, it can lead to mixed signal in foreign policy. So for me personally, I think that this policy, it's not Papua New Guinea. It was good when we got independence, because at the time we were, Papua New Guinea become a new state. Therefore, at that time, our forefathers see that this approach was good for the people. But now we are leading the 50th anniversary of Papua New Guinea, and during the current tension in Western, sooner or later PNG has to take sides now. And by being neutral, we will not take seriously. But at the same time, whilst we being neutral and to everyone, we are easily being influenced by other countries. So we had to we had to take sides. Which sides we will take? That Papua New Guinea has to have the guts to do it. And for example, when it comes to military and all that, we are lacking. We are so lacking. As what statistics, just recent I saw PNG Defense Force statistics and personnel. We only had 3,000 some hundreds. That's the current defense force number of Papua New Guinea. So seeing that, like I think one of the major reasons Papua New Guinea is it's still developing and we are lacking is because of this foreign policy, friends to enemy, where it affects our development as a country. Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to I agree wholeheartedly with you that it leads to mixed signals internally and internationally, because then departmental heads would also interpret it differently. Like the other one was saying, we're acting like yo-yos, because you want to be friends to all, and so if you're friends to all, how about you running plain blade? For goodness sake, I mean, imagine if it's a rugby league game, you friends to all, you just want to play a social match. Win, lose, number must be. Have not got 2 points in there, man.
We'll have elaborate the last person, and then we'll conclude. But thank you, Marcus, for the challenging questions and provoking comment. You've really provoked us to think.
Thank you.
All right, Labud, I will have you, and then we'll conclude. And the others we can continue on Wednesday.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Yagir and Mr. Ako for your presentation earlier. So I have 5 comments and 2 questions. So I'll begin with my comments and then I'll move on to my questions. So my first comment is, as Papua New Guinea marks 50 years of independence this year, it's a good time to reflect on the values that shaped our nation: self-reliance and friends to all, enemies to none. But as Mr. Ako mentioned somewhere along the line, that many of our early economic and defense plans were influenced by outsiders. PNG, sorry. So with PNG set to release a new foreign policy white paper next month, we now have a chance to put our national interests first. The big question is, how do we make sure our future development reflects our own values, not just what others want? I hope that with the new policy, it can help us take ownership of our foreign relations and guide our growth in a way that stays true to who we are, especially as we celebrate 50 years of nationhood. So moving on to my second comment, an article titled Beware of the Red Dragon from the Post Korea published last Thursday raises concerns that China's growing influence in the Pacific is threatening the independence of nations like Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. The article argues that China's use of soft loans could lead to a debt trap that compromises a country's sovereignty. In Honiara, as of last week, there was an ongoing public debate on China controlling who gets a visa. This new challenge tests PNG's traditional foreign policy of being friends to all and enemies to none. This situation is similar to the challenges countries faced at independence. So just as nations once had to form alliances to stand against colonial powers, today they must consider new strategic partnerships to protect their interests from a powerful nation like China as well as others. To my third comment, back then, late Somare's 8 aims at independence laid out a clear vision for an independent, self-reliant economy with a focus on rural development and equitable wealth distribution. Today, PNG has become a resource-rich country, but many people still live in poverty. The benefits of mining and LNG projects have not always translated into the widespread development and improved services that late Somare envisioned. This raises a key question. Was the vision lost, or was it simply too hard to achieve? Moving on to my fourth comment, Mr. Ako made an interesting point that people who carry out policy, like government workers or advisors, can affect it in both good and bad ways. So even if a policy is well designed, it might not work properly if it's not carried out the right way. This shows that how a policy is put into action is just as important as the policy itself. And finally, to my fifth comment, it's fascinating how business and politics are becoming more connected. And Mr. Ako's presentation raises an important point that business leaders today often act like unofficial diplomats. They don't just manage companies, they help shape international relationships. A clear example, according to Post Korea this year, is Prime Minister James Marape's landmark visit to Japan last month, where he was joined by PNG business leaders to discuss trade, investment, and development cooperation. During the visit, Marape proposed a new Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, to reset and elevate PNG-Japan economic relations for the next 50 years. The delegation also explored opportunities in agriculture, fisheries, infrastructure, and energy, showing how business leaders play a key role in representing national interests abroad. That is all for my comments, and I will now move on to my two questions. So my question is, during the presentation, Ms. Akoy, that you gave last week, you spoke about the late Sir Marikiki as the first Foreign Affairs Minister. So my question reads, with the formulation of the foreign policy, were there debates on the best foreign policy approach, and how long did it take to formulate? I'll let you answer that, and then I'll move on to my second question. Thank you.
The universalism foreign policy was a strategic intent. There was no white paper on it. Okay? And I am of the opinion that most parts of it was taken out from Angu Party's Mr. Aker, was it 8-point plan or 12-point plan? 12-point plan. 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 12 because the Constitution's 8-point plan is taken out from the Pango policy.
I
So-
think it's 8 point. We have to confirm.
Okay, yeah. So it was based on that, and knowing that the late then Chief Minister Sir Michael was the head of Pango, they just used that to drive our strategic intent. I think also, I mean, just out of hindsight, it was a good thing or using this Lapango or something to support allow him or colonial powers to help him or drive him go interest blow game. So that was the best. I think that was the best thing that came out of our independence was our own homemade foreign policy. And now I'm going to the home answering my question about was homemade good. I think it was good that it was our own plan. Good plan or no good, but then both Papa working the family and you just ban it. And then 5 years later, they are because we became 5 years experience.
Thank you, Mr. Akpo. So to my second and last question, you mentioned something about the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, I believe last week in your presentation. So my question is, why do you think the IBRD report focused so heavily on agriculture and ignored the potential of mining, even though the Panguna mine was being developed or under construction at the time? Thank you.
At first glance, I would only have one simple question. I think that the geopolitics had a influence on that. We will have to look at the makeup of the delegation that came as part of the IBRD. Note very well that the IBRD was I think set up to repair the well of the devastations of World War II. So then, once we look at who were the victors, and among the victors and one of the major multinational companies been involved with investor research, and we can draw conclusions. Just one more point, which you also raised regarding the implementation of the new foreign policy. If we were asked how are we going to implement it, it will require a widespread training of a new foreign policy of all the departments. If we want, then that will counter that will go beyond the French to enemy to none and mantra, because now the whole public service machinery is trained to implement the effort. We can't have 1% of the public service machinery being aware and know how to implement the FP and the other 90% not salary. I'm still the number one. So while we were talking, I just came up with a few notes. Yes, training in the new. Well, of course, you have to train for an game plan to go out and win. And when you break it down to all the departments, it's a department to agriculture, you got focus value, but with the strategic intent, and there is the foreign policy, health, education, everyone. And we ourselves are becoming aware that all those departments play a huge role in foreign policy through the contracts they have with the private companies. I mean,
And everyone,
we don't need to
flight 435 to Melbourne, now boarding gate
the
number
supply
please.
of
Flight
pharmaceuticals
437 to
and
Melbourne,
how
now
a
boarding
company
gate
is
number
monopolizing it.
Flight
And
902
it goes to affecting our foreign policy,
eight.
the economy where the country is based out of. Okay,
Qantas flight 645 to Perth.
so those are good points,
boarding gate
Mr. Lamone. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Akpo.
Yeah, thank you, Through Lamonina. Thank you, Mr. Ako, for your time. That brings us to the end of our session for today. And we'll continue on Wednesday from 2 to 4 p.m. We've got I've checked voting, and 19 of you voted for Wednesday 2 to 4 p.m. So a majority rules in the democracy. So we will have our next discussion Q&A session on Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock this Wednesday. Tomorrow, I mean.
Sorry, Mr. Aguirre, I have to explain myself.
Yeah,
On
please.
Friday, on Friday, I am attending the Crocodile Memorial Service at the Gold Coast. It is part of the Papua Infantry Battalion Association, which I am a member of. And I happen to be also the PNG representative of the PIB-PIR Association. And I've never attended that gathering for the last 2 years. So only showcasing the gathering it's at the Gold Coast, and it's about an hour's train ride from Brisbane to the Gold Coast. So if you start from 10 and finish at 12, and then I don't know how long I can take your taxi to get to the train station when the trains are running. So I would have come in late on Friday afternoon. That's why I requested for this change of timing and day. And I thank you very much thank you to you all for accepting my excuse. So looking forward to Wednesday then.
Thank you, Mr. Ako. Thank you for the explanation.
And
You all have
next week I'll tell you all about the Crocodile Day thing.
Yeah, that will be good. Give us a brief. All right. Thank you, everyone. All of you have a nice day, and we'll see all of you tomorrow afternoon again. Okay,
Good
Mr.
luck.
Ako, take care.
Yeah, school good, Ogata.